Elden Ring gives us enormous demigods, impossible bodies, and warriors who barely seem human anymore. So we accept the red hair as Radagon's and the gigantic body as Radahn simply being Radahn. But I think those two traits belong to the same story. Radahn was not literally a fire giant, but he may have inherited fire giant ancestry through Radagon. And ancestry is an important word here. The game never calls Radahn a giant. It never calls Radagon one either. And if current theory required either of those things, I wouldn't believe it. What bothers me is something more precise. Go to Redmane Castle and cross into the Wailing Dunes. Radahn appears against the huge sailed sky like a moving piece of the landscape. Then you see Leonard underneath him. The tiny horse changes the evidence. Radahn's scale isn't just something we perceive because he is a boss. His relationship with Leonard makes that size part of his actual story. Radahn learned gravity magic so he could continue riding the horse he had outgrown. His body became so massive that maintaining something as ordinary as riding required sorcery. Now leave Sailed and travel north, past Leyndell, through the Forbidden Lands, into the mountaintops of the giants. The scale changes again. Huge chains cross the landscape. Giant corpses are frozen into the snow. The forge dominates the summit. And when the last fire giant rises, the surrounding ruins suddenly make sense as a remnant of a world built around bodies much larger than ours. Radahn is nowhere near the fire giant's full size. That isn't the point here. The point is that Elden Ring lore has already taught us to associate giant kind with extreme physical scale, and Radahn combines that unusual scale with another trait the game explicitly connects to the giants – the red hair. Not vaguely reddish hair, not a visual coincidence the game never acknowledges. Radahn's red mane equipment tells us where his flaming red hair came from – Radagon. Radahn inherited it from his father, and he was proud of it. He turned that inheritance into an identity. The red mane, the lion, the image of a warrior descended from a champion. So one part of the chain is confirmed. Radagon's red hair passes to Radahn. And then becomes much more interesting when we pick up one particular weapon in the mountaintops – the Giant's Red Braid. Because that item doesn't just describe a fire giant, it drags Radagon into the description itself. And once Radagon appears there, Radahn's body becomes much harder to dismiss as coincidence. The Giant's Red Braid is where I think this theory either lives or dies. The weapon itself is already visual evidence – a whip made from the fire giant's enormous red braid. Something physical, something we have just seen attached to the last survivor of an ancient race. Then the description establishes a rule. Every giant is red-haired. And immediately after establishing that trait, the text turns to Radagon and tells us that he despises his own red locks, before raising the possibility of a curse associated with the giants. Fire giants have red hair, Radagon has red hair. And for some reasons, an item made from a fire giant's body wants us thinking about Radagon. That doesn't confirm Radagon was part giant, but it creates an association that the ancestry theory doesn't have to invent. At first I wanted something stronger – hidden monument, a piece of dialogue, an item description simply saying Radagon descended from the giants. We never get it. But the absence of that confirmation doesn't make the braid meaningless. The description could have stayed entirely focused on the fire giant, the forge, the flame, or the war. Instead it points at Radagon's body. Why? That question becomes more important when we return to Radahn. Because the game don't merely give father and the son same hair color. It tells us Radahn inherited it. That gives a physical chain. Fire giants are defined by the red hair. The giant's red braid deliberately associates that characteristic with Radagon. Radahn explicitly inherits Radagon's red hair, and Radahn develops an extraordinary physical scale. The last part is actually interpretation. Size alone proves nothing. Elden Ring is full of enormous beings who are not fire giants. But once a braid has already established a Radagon-giant connection, Radahn's body becomes supporting evidence rather than foundation of the theory. That is important, because we don't need every strange thing about Radahn to come from giants. His gravity magic has its own history. He studied it and mastered it. We don't need to turn gravity sorcery into secret fell god magic just because visual patterns can be compared. We don't need his great rune either. Yes, it burns, but the Elden Ring lore gives that fire a purpose. The great rune burns to resist the scarlet rot consuming him. Calling that fire giant evidence actually weakens the case, so strip it away. No secret fell god connection, no great rune argument. No elaborate reconstruction of Radagon as a forgotten giant blacksmith. What remains is narrowed but stronger. Something about Radagon's red hair is important enough that a weapon made from a fire giant explicitly calls attention to it. Radahn then inherits that exact trait from Radagon and grows into a body of exceptional size and strength. If there is a giant ancestry here, Radagon is a breach. But the Giant's Red Braid contains another interpretation, and this one nearly destroys the entire theory, by the way. Let's read the Giant's Red Braid as skeptically as possible. It never says Radagon descendant from giants. That matters. The description can be read another way. Radagon's red hair may not represent ancestry at all, it may represent punishment. Go back to the mountain tops, and that possibility starts to feel surprisingly natural. The war against the giants is still carved into the landscape. Their bodies remain where they fell, their forge survives, their flame survives. The last fire giant survives only under a punishment that forces him to go up that flame. That was annihilation of a civilization-sized scale. Against that backdrop, the phrase about Giant's curse can sound less like genetic and more like retaliation. Maybe Radagon's red hair was something inflicted on him, a mark, a reminder, something connected to the enemies destroyed by the Golden Order. That would also give Radagon's hatred of his own hair a straightforward emotional logic. If the hair simply represented ancestry, his disgust requires another explanation. If it represented a curse placed upon him, the hatred makes it immediate sense. There is another problem. Radagon can be hurt badly by fire. If we imagine him as some straightforward half-fire giant figure, that vulnerability feels awkward. The beings we are trying to connect him to are defined by their relationship with flame. And then there is Radahn himself. His size feels important until we look around the rest of the lands between. Morgoth is enormous, Mog is enormous, Godfrey towers over ordinary humans, Malenia does too. Elden Ring uses physical scale constantly to communicate power, transformation, lineage and divinity. Large bodies are not exclusive to giant kind, so Radahn's size can prove the theory. His burning great rune cannot prove it. And if Radagon's red hair came from the curse rather than giant ancestry, then the strongest connection appears to collapse as well. For a moment that leaves us with almost nothing. But only if curse and inheritance are opposites, and I don't think they are. That is a distinction that changed the theory for me. We keep asking whether Radagon was secretly a fire giant, as like it is the only way Radahn could inherit something giant-related, and it isn't. And we keep treating the curse interpretation like it automatically disapproves inheritance, and it doesn't too. Whatever caused Radagon's red hair, one fact survives every interpretation. Radahn inherited it. That is a part I keep coming back to. The Giant's Red Braid associates the defining red hair of the giants with Radagon. Then Radahn's own equipment tells us that this same visible characteristic passed from Radagon to his son. Fire giants, Radagon, Radahn. We can argue about what happened at the first step, but the second step is much clearer. Something physically present in Radagon becomes physically present in Radahn. That means the curse interpretation doesn't necessarily destroy the theory. It may change what inheritance means. Maybe Radagon carried actual giant ancestry. That remains possible, but unconfirmed. Or maybe giants placed something upon Radagon that became part of him deeply enough to pass it into his children. That is also speculation, but notice what both explanations preserve. Radahn can manifest something originating with the giants without secretly being a fire giant himself. Now his body becomes interesting again. Radahn grows so enormous that his physical development changes his relationship with Leonard, his horse. He has to manipulate gravity just to continue riding. That scale is acknowledged inside the world. Pair it with inherited red hair, and we get a son seems to express Radagon's strange giant-associated characteristic more dramatically than Radagon does. That is exactly why I would not call Radahn a fire giant. The claim is too simple. There is no hidden fire giant parent. No dialect naming Radahn giant kin, no item that gives a clean genealogy from mountaintops to Radagon. What we have is transmission. A giant-associated trait appears on Radagon. Radahn inherits it. And in Radahn it exists alongside a body of extraordinary scale and strength. The difference sounds small, but it changes the whole argument. I'm not trying to prove Radahn belonged to the fire giant. I'm asking whether something from the giant survived in Radagon and then surfaced against on his son. And if that is what actually happened, the game may have hidden the connection precisely where we should expect to find it, not in family tree, on their bodies. So when I look at Radahn now, I don't see an evidence that he was secretly a fire giant. I see a descendant whose body may preserve a much older connection. Radagon carries a physical characteristic that Elden Ring deliberately associates with the giants. His son inherits it, and that son becomes one of the most physically gigantic members of his family. The game never tells us why. Maybe Radagon really did carry distant giant blood. Maybe the connection began with the curse instead. We cannot resolve that from the evidence we have. But that uncertainty creates a stranger problem than the original theory, because if Radagon's red hair was simply genetic, Radahn inheriting it is exactly what we would expect. If it was a curse, though, something much more unsettling happened. The giants didn't merely leave a mark on Radagon. They left something that could pass from father to child. And if that is true, Radahn's enormous body may not be asking us whether he was part of Fire Giant at all. It may be asking us what, exactly, the Fire Giants put inside Radagon, and how much of it survived in his children. Thanks for watching, hit that like button and subscribe for more Elden Ring and other Souls-like games lore and guide videos, and stay sharp out there, Tarnished.